right, guys. So welcome to the first Synergy Speaker Series. Thank you, Wilfredo. All right. So today's topic is going to be expectations. All right. So as young people, or first of all, let's start off by defining expectations. How would you guys define an expectation? Come on, don't be afraid to talk.
Say that again.
How would you define an expectation?
Something that someone expects you to do. I don't know.
Okay.
You're looking forward to.
Yeah, exactly, right? So something that they're looking forward to you doing, absolutely, right? And then it could be something that you may not think that you're necessarily capable of, but they can see something in you, right? They can see some sort of potential. Yes, absolutely. All right. So as young men and women in school, some of you guys who may be working right now, what are some, or who are those who tend to have the most expectations of you right now? Parents, right? So what are some expectations that parents have?
Be responsible.
Being responsible. Finishing school, right? So then getting your high school diploma.
Being healthy.
Okay.
Your house is clean.
Okay, so helping out with some of the chores, making sure your house is clean.
My parents expect me when I get a job, I have to help them pay the bills.
Okay, so yeah, so contribute, right? Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that's unfair?
Yeah.
Yes, that's unfair.
So
because those are expectations that you're living for free. Those are expectations. You have to, once you hit that certain point.
yeah, right. So
No,
just like when they reach a certain age, right? They were expected to provide for you guys.
The biggest expectation I'm gonna give them, like I'm gonna succeed for them, is 12 plus years of school.
12 plus years of school.
Yes, and that's what that's what I'm giving them.
Okay, so that's gonna be their gift.
Yeah.
And then so they're gonna have to. Okay, all right. We'll continue with that in a second. Who are some? All right, so we have parents. Who are other groups of people who tend to have expectations of you? Teachers, right? What are some of their expectations?
To do your work, stay in class, be respectful, pay attention.
Okay. All right. And then what about one other group? If you're working, who has expectations?
Bosses, managers.
Yeah, right? Your supervisors, right? Your higher ups. Okay. What are some expectations that they have?
For you to be on time.
Being on time, making sure that you show up when you're supposed to be there, right?
Show effort.
What's that?
Show effort.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Show
exactly.
product.
Yeah, so when you're there, right, they're expecting you to work the entire time, right? So if your shift is from 8 to 12 or 8 to 4, so between those hours, they're expecting you to get the job done. All right, absolutely. Now, why might they have those expectations of you? In general, of all these groups, why do they have these expectations of you?
Because of the position you're in.
Okay, so then because of the position you're in as a student?
Yeah.
Okay, right? But then is it... So, like, at the end of the day, one of the reasons why they set these expectations of you is because they want to see you succeed, right? Is that something that you guys would agree with?
Yeah.
Right? So a teacher, right? Teacher has they have tons of expectations of you, right? The CRI is a set of expectations, right? But the reason why we set up that CRI and we kind of communicate all these different expectations, because at the end of the day, we want to see you cross that stage, right? We want to help give you the skills that once you guys graduate from here, you guys are going to be able to get into the college that you guys want to get into. You guys will be prepared to go into the world of work, right? So then when you go out there, the expectations that an employer has of you, you guys would automatically be able to fulfill their expectations, right? So right now, do you guys, unfortunately, you guys are in a stage where a bunch of people have expectations of you guys. Do you guys think that you guys follow those expectations, or you guys kind of adhere to?
Sometimes.
There's a lot of pressure most of the time.
Yeah, right? Yeah, there could be tons of pressure.
Or sometimes you're just not in the mood for anything, so.
Okay, so like personal feelings kind of get in the way,
Yeah.
right? I guess like one of my major recommendations though is that you take their guidance, right? So if a group of people are expecting you to do a certain thing or to get your diploma, right, at the end of the year or whatever, that you take their guidance, right? Because then those people who have these positive expectations of you, they won't steer you wrong, right? So if anything, you could use that as a motivation. So if you have your parents who are, kind of breathing down your neck or wanting you to make sure that you wake up on time, get to the bus on time, right? It's not necessarily for them to kind of tear you down or anything like that. It's because they're trying to help motivate you, right? All right, absolutely. So sometimes there's, like you said, Wilfredo, right? Sometimes we're not feeling too good, right? We're feeling a little lazy. Maybe I don't want to go to school today. Maybe I don't want to come to work today. Maybe I don't want to dress up or anything like that, right? Those parents, right? Those teachers, these people who have these positive expectations of you, right? Hopefully that would be a motivator for you, right? So one of the things, I just had a conversation with a student earlier today who may be like not necessarily feeling school this year, right? But one of the things that he used as a motivator was the fact that his family really wanted him to get his degree, right? Wanted this to be his final year, so then, he could get his diploma and he can move on to the next stage of his life, right? So hopefully he'd be able to, a month from now when he's not feeling so motivated, he can think about that, right? And just say, all right, you know what? I may not want to do it for myself right now, but let me do it for my family, because come June, right, they want to see me cross the stage. They want to see me do better. All right, so that's a major motivating factor. All right. So another thing, right? Do people always have the most positive expectations of us?
Not always.
Okay, not always, right? So as young people right now, what are some not so nice expectations you think different people might have of you? So say you're going for a job interview. What might an employer, so they see that you're 16, 17, 18. What are some thoughts that just may come to mind as young folks? Okay, all right, fair. All right, so maybe you guys, I don't know, you guys are younger, right? So maybe you guys may not have the maturity level of someone who's a little bit older, right? You guys may not be well prepared for the job, right? You guys may not have the same work ethic as others, right? So I guess when it comes down to expectations, one of the things that you want to do is when it comes to those people who have negative expectations of you, you want to try to prove them wrong, right? Wouldn't it feel good if someone has this negative thought? It's like, oh, Ernesto's coming in here.
I expect him to do crazy things.
Yeah, right?
And then you actually do your work and stuff, and they didn't expect that. Your expectations was to do your work, and you actually did it.
Exactly, right? So then that's two things, right? So then you were able to prove me wrong, right? And then you were able to, help yourself in the process, right? So sometimes you want to take these negative expectations that people have of you, right? And you want to continually try to prove them wrong.
Turn them positive.
Yeah, most definitely, right? So this is something that you could continually do, right? So I guess one of the most important things that when it comes to that is if you're going to try to continue proving people wrong, because people are unfortunately going to have negative expectations of you your entire lives, right? You're going to have to work at it, right? So if you're going into that job interview, you want to make sure that you try to dazzle them, right? You try to shock them with the amount of experience that you may have, or just your attire, right? So let's say you're going into an interview at McDonald's, right? Or a Best Buy. Sometimes people who go into interview just may have polo and some slacks and some decent shoes. Sometimes you may want to overdress, right? So then what's the worst that they can say? No one has ever said that I don't like this person because they exceeded my expectations, So always kind of do things to the max. You want to over prepare sometimes, right? So then when you go into that interview or this different setting, they can't help but be surprised by how professional you are, right? The way you carry yourself, the way you speak to them, right? The amount of information that you know and your passion, how willing you are to work with people, right? So you always want to do that, right? Sometimes always, what's that? Say again?
So you want to push yourself more than just the expectation.
Yeah, right? So if they have that negative expectation, you want to prove them wrong, right? And then exceed their expectations. Okay, one of the things, one of the best pieces of advice that my father ever gave me was to always be undeniable, right? So when you walk into a room, and so let's see. So when I was younger, I kind of got into a field where a lot of the people that I had to work with were a lot older than I was, right? So they're like, oh, this kid, he's young, he probably won't know that much, right? So one of the things that I had to do was, I had to prepare. I had to make sure that I knew what I was talking about. I had to carry myself in a particular way, right, in a professional manner. So when I left them, they're like, oh man, he was well versed. He knew how to speak to people. He carried himself really well, right? So they're like, you want to make sure that they can't help but say great things about you at the end of the day when you leave them. Okay? So that's the other thing. Now, so let's say you follow the expectations that people set for you, right? You prove some of like the naysayers wrong, right? Now, let's say you go out, you end up doing a job for several years, and then you become a supervisor or manager, right? Now, one of the major things that you're going to want to do is communicate your expectations, right? Yesterday in advisory, one of the things that we talked about was the importance of communication, right? So when you're communicating your expectations, how do you want to do that? How would you expect, as an employee or a future employer, how would you want someone to address you, right? Yep, so you want to be respectful, absolutely. What are some other things?
Mature.
You would expect them to be mature? Or you'd be expected to be mature, carry yourself that way?
I forgot the question.
Okay. So as a future employer, right, what are some expectations that you'd have of people?
If you were the boss,
Yeah.
what would you expect from people working for you?
I would expect them. I don't know. I would expect them to do my work, to do
Okay.
the things I say.
Okay. Yep. And then I guess, let's see. How would you expect them to communicate these expectations? So, all right. So let's kind of go back, right? You're an employee. You have a supervisor, right? How would you expect them to communicate their expectations to you?
With a positive attitude.
Right. So you want your supervisor, your manager, to be positive?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Wilfredo, what about you? How else would you want them to speak to you?
Respectfully.
Okay, so in a respectful tone, absolutely. Right? You'd want them to be specific, right? You don't necessarily want them to be vague, right? You want them to be concise and direct, right? So you wouldn't necessarily want them to talk to you for like a half an hour.
About something that they could have talked to you about like for 3 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, most definitely, right? Another major thing, you want them to lead by example, right? So if they're saying, listen, I want you from 8 to 3, right? You know, they're going to be there their entire shift as well, right? They're not necessarily going to take like a 2-hour lunch break, stuff like that. All right? You know, you want them to communicate frequently. So if there's an issue, right, you want them to be able to talk to you about it, okay? Do you guys remember the sandwich method that we talked about last year?
Yeah.
Yeah, right? So then when they're coming to you respectfully, Alex, right? Like you mentioned earlier, right? They're not necessarily addressing you with just the negative aspects, right? So I kind of say all the expectations that you'd have as an employer, because these are things that you're going to want to routinely practice when you become managers and supervisors and employers and such, okay? So you want to make sure that you communicate the expectations that you have in a respectful manner, okay? You want to make sure that you're concise, that you're direct, that you lead by example, okay? So sometimes, you know, it's going to take a lot of work, right? So sometimes you're going to be the first one in, you're going to be the last one out, all right? But that's one of the things that is essentially expected of you, but then something that you expect of your peers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then that you're communicating frequently. So, and then, yeah, so you're making sure, like, if there's a smaller issue or there's something that you want to address, that you're continually doing that, okay? And then you're just doing it at an adequate time, all right? So I guess that's it. You know, so we talked about 3 different areas. You know, we talked about, you know, trying to adhere to the expectations that people have of you, right? Using that as a motivating factor. 2 is, trying to prove some of the naysayers wrong, right? People who have negative expectations of you, trying to, you know, preparing yourself so that you could prove them wrong, right? Being undeniable. You want to make sure you do that. And then when you guys eventually kind of get to that successful position, right, where you're a supervisor and you're in charge of a small staff or whatever the case is, you want to make sure that you can communicate your expectations effectively. All right? Do you guys have any questions?
No.
You broke expectations down to so many pieces. Oh my god.
Yeah.